The ignored child is often the most psychologically dangerous person in the room, not because they are evil, but because they have learned invisibility as survival. While the world obsesses over abused children, we rarely talk about the ones who were simply not seen. And as attachment researcher John Bowlby once implied through his work, a child's deepest need is not perfection or discipline, but connection. Remove consistent emotional attention, and you don't get a quiet child. You get a child who begins negotiating with their own existence. Being ignored can be more psychologically destabilizing than being criticized. Criticism at least confirms you exist. Ignoring someone erases them. Psychologist William James famously wrote, "The deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated." Imagine that craving forming before language even develops. When caregivers are emotionally unavailable, distracted, depressed, addicted, overwhelmed, the child doesn't think, "My parent is struggling." They think, "I must not be worth noticing." That belief becomes the operating system. Social rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger demonstrated that the brain registers social exclusion similarly to bodily injury. So when a child repeatedly experiences emotional neglect, their nervous system treats it as a threat. Over time, they either become hyper-attuned to others by being people pleasers, overachievers, or emotional caretakers, or they become detached so thoroughly that they appear cold, aloof, and even narcissistic. Both adaptations are survival strategies. The ignored child doesn't stop needing love, they just learn to stop asking. Many ignored children grow up praised for being independent. They don't cause trouble. They don't demand attention. They handle things on their own. Society rewards this self-sufficiency, not realizing it may have been born from emotional abandonment. Psychologist Donald Winnicott spoke of the false self, the persona a child develops to cope with an environment that does not adequately mirror them. The ignored child often becomes whatever earns acknowledgement. And the tragedy? They can spend decades performing competence while quietly starving for attunement. The ignored child doesn't just grow up, they adapt into adulthood in ways that fascinate and unsettle psychologists. Some become chronic overachievers, chasing applause like oxygen. Others develop an almost militant self-reliance, insisting they don't need anyone, while their nervous system secretly scans every room for signs of rejection. Psychiatrist Alfred Adler once said, "The only normal people are the ones you don't know very well." The ignored child masters this principle. They become unreadable, hyperfunctional, impressive, and internally unsure whether anyone would notice if they disappeared. Many adults who fear abandonment were not abandoned in dramatic ways. They were emotionally overlooked in subtle, chronic ways. No one asked what they felt. No one lingered long enough to decode their silence. Over time, they learned to intellectualize feelings instead of experiencing them. Psychologist Alice Miller wrote, "The child who is not allowed to express feelings becomes an adult who does not know what they feel. The ignored child often becomes fluent in analyzing others, but illiterate in their own emotional language. That emotional blind spot can shape relationships into confusing battlegrounds of distance and desperation." Neglected children are statistically more likely to struggle with identity diffusion. When no one mirrors your internal world, you grow up unsure where you end and others begin. You may overmerge in relationships or withdraw completely. Developmental psychologist Erik Erikson argued that identity forms through social feedback. If that feedback is absent, identity becomes fragile or performative. This is why some ignored children grow into adults who reinvent themselves constantly. New aesthetics, new ambitions, new social circles, hoping one version will finally be seen. The ignored child can become emotionally intimidating. They've spent years observing, reading microexpressions, anticipating shifts in tone. Emotional neglect often produces acute sensitivity. They can detect subtle rejection before it's consciously expressed. That hyper-awareness can make them brilliant therapists, artists, leaders, or deeply anxious partners. As Carl Rogers said, "What is most personal is most universal." The ignored child's private ache for recognition is not rare. It's quietly epidemic. We just don't call it trauma because it didn't leave visible marks.